restrictions, significant restrictions, strike rights, and that of course has markedly increased both in the USA and in Europe the relative number of immigrant workers. And of course there has been this complete dismantling of capital controls, international capital mobility. I shall come back to this point later on, but this has brought about significant interest rates, growth rate differential. I mean, capital mobility has implied a loss of control over the domestic level of interest rates, especially in the European context. And this has in turn brought about an increasing gap between interest rate and growth rates, which has led to the formation of primary surplus in order to check the growth in the ratio of public debt to GDP. But we shall return to this point later on. Then, of course, trade from low-wage developing countries has increased significantly, together with direct investment flow, investment in plant and equipment to low-wage developing countries, and a significant employment shift to lower-paying service-producing industries. We can say that the last 5 factors, we started from relative number of immigrant workers, and the last one, they constitute altogether the phenomenon of globalization, the acceleration in the internalization of these economies, of advanced capitalism as a whole. And the last 3, no, the last, no, that's it. And yes, the last 3, in a sense, are one of the sources of the process of deindustrialization which has occurred within advanced capitalism over the last 30 years. We continue with these factors. These are the factors, the direction in which they have moved. Well, the first one, the incidence of full-time employment, which has been significantly reduced, is a consequence, in a sense, is the other side of the coin of the first 3 factors indicated before, the first 3, which were unemployment rates, privatizations, overall labor market flexibility, and strictly linked to those 3 factors can be regarded the incidence of full-time employment, which experienced a significant reduction, and then the rate of unionization, employment protection legislation, legal rule, which means ultimately legal rules concerning hiring, dismissing, working hours, types of labor contracts, minimum wages. This is especially true for the United States, in Europe for Holland. France is a different case because France has the minimum wage, the SMIC, but in France one cannot regard the behavior of minimum wages as a cause, as a factor determining a weakening of wage earners' bargaining power, because in France the minimum wage is indexed to the consumer price index and to the behavior of money wages, so there's an effect rather than a cause. But for example, as far as Holland is concerned, and even more as far as the United States is concerned, minimum wages, the behavior, the tendency of minimum wages over the last 30 years to go down has been a significant determinant. And then the last 2 factors, indirect and deferred wages, which means collective services and pensions substantially, and overall progressive of the tax system, together are one and the same thing as the welfare state, let's say. The welfare state, especially in the European context has suffered a significant impact, almost this moment. Now, among these factors, as well as between them and wage earner bargaining power, very much. Something that happened here. A complex net of interconnections tends to establish itself. This net of interconnection, I think, can be pictured by that scheme, at the center of which I think one can reasonably put the general state of employment, i.e. employment levels and policies. Why at the center? Because it is, I think, reasonable to regard the state of employment, that is to say, employment levels and policy, as the chief determinant of wage earner bargaining power. In that scheme, the feedbacks from wage earners' bargaining power to the state of employment and the other determinants of wage earners' bargaining power, it appears on the left-hand side of the scheme, these feedbacks occur through the course of real wages, both direct and indirect wages. The point is that household income, both household income of low and middle income households, both in the USA and in Europe, is almost entirely made up of wages and salaries, so that any change in their level affects correspondingly aggregate demand and employment, thereby creating the conditions for further changes in wage earners' bargaining power and income distribution. Now, as we shall see presently, there are linkages also between the factors appearing on the left-hand side of the scheme, that is, between the state of employment and the welfare state, between the state of employment and globalization, and labor market flexibility, as well as between globalization and the industry mix of employment. Several of such linkages have been acknowledged in the literature, one way or another. It is the case as regards those between employment levels, unions' bargaining power, and rates of unionization, as well as those between employment levels, the incidence of collective bargaining arrangements, and of full employment, and of full-time employment. Also, the linkages between globalization and the industry mix of employment have been widely acknowledged, together with those between globalization and labor market flexibility. As to the linkages between globalization and the industry mix of employment, attention has been drawn on the continuous shift over the last 30 years from goods producing to lower paying services industries, resulting from trade and deindustrialization. As to the linkages between globalization and labor market flexibility, attention has been drawn on the overall enhanced disposition on the part of workers to grant wage and other concessions to their employers as an outcome of the mere threat of direct foreign competition or of the relocation of part or all of a production facility. But here, I should like to call your attention on a few logical historical aspects of the above interconnections, which, while generally overlooked, seem to me as especially relevant for a deeper understanding of the breakdown of wage earners' bargaining power throughout advanced capitalism.